The following is a presentation of the Radio Misfits Podcast Network.
From the birthplace of modern winemaking, Sonoma, California, welcome to The Winemakers. Local experts Sam Couturi, Bart Hansen, and Brian Casey, along with host John Myers, invite you to listen in as they discuss all facets of winemaking. So sit back, pour yourself a glass, and let's hear what the guys have to say this week.
Okay, here we go.
All right,
we start.
Everybody, welcome to the Winemakers. Nice pour this morning. Beautiful. What was that, man?
I mean,
Get right into it.
this is Brian's like all this wine in front of me, and I need to taste it.
Yeah, you put a bottle of Bandol Rosé in front of Brian,
Right?
and didn't tell him when he was allowed to pour it. He was going to pour it when he damn well wanted to.
Absolutely.
I think I came to the right place. If this is how we roll,
This is exactly how
Breakfast
we roll, man.
Bandol from the serial wine entrepreneur.
Welcome, everybody, to the Winemakers. I am John Myers with Brian Casey, Bart Hansen, and Sam Couturi, and our special guest today, Charles Bieler, serial wine hustler from
Okay, I like that.
that's one of the titles. Yeah,
and from Père à Fils.
Bieler Paris. Yeah,
Yeah,
you
there
got
you
it.
go. Absolutely. Excellent. I'm glad I asked my wife how to pronounce that in
For our
French.
French
She did
pronunciation
great.
lessons this morning.
Because I'm not. I can do canard, confit, vin rouge, all those things that matter in France. So other than that, I'm helpless.
Okay.
So, welcome, Matt. On a rainy rainy morning. At least we don't have an atmospheric river. So
The weather service that Enterprise Vineyards subscribes to, that sends out a daily email this morning, had a typo, and instead of updating the email subject to say Wednesday forecast for Napa Sonoma, it said Wednesday forecast for Puget Sound. And it was like, that was an unintentional truth. I think is kind of how it feels out there right now.
Very northwest.
Very northwest.
how the hell did it come up with that?
Well, I imagine that this same weather service, creates a report every morning for it's
Everybody
ag weather
everywhere.
all over the country, right? So every region has a different report, and
And it's probably a total match. What's happening? in
yeah,
Puget
totally.
Sound.
It's exactly like it was just a carbon copy. Sonoma Napa feels like we're in Seattle this morning for sure.
Totally.
Well, we're not. We are in slow Noma.
Wait, how come I didn't get any Bandol Rosé over here, guys?
Well, because it's over here.
You didn't talk too much.
There you go. Yes,
That checks
there
out.
you go.
Have you listened to the show
Yeah.
before? Clearly.
Little 22 Bandol Rosé. Which, Charles, what are you doing here anyway? You must just be out doing some tastings.
Yeah, I
pouring
mean,
some wine.
It's selling season. Fall is making season, and then this is the selling season.
Yeah,
You
especially
make
for
the
rosé,
donuts,
right?
you got to sell the donuts.
Sun
So this
comes
is
out.
we make lots of wines that we release pretty early on. Starts in the winter, and so these months I get out there and see as many people as I can, and try to make it as personal as I can, and tell some stories.
So you're on a sales blitz.
Oh man, yeah. I mean, it's been going for I don't know, a month or so already. I've been everywhere.
And shout out to Joni Boots for thinking about us grabbing you while you were in town.
Yeah. Happy to be
Joni
here.
and Cash.
Jody Cash is here somewhere.
That's right. He's under
He's
the
at our
table.
feet.
hanging out.
He's waiting for
What's up, guys?
some rosé to
Treats,
splash down his way.
Well, I don't know if that was the wine we should open first. I know I went right for the Bandol
Sure.
because it's
Because
one of
why
my
not?
favorites. Yeah, exactly. But you know what?
I
Talk
often
about
say if just on the Bandol and trying to
Yeah.
give it some perspective to people, and correct, you are all winemakers, right? And I say, if you're
serial
a
wine
winemaker-
drinkers, I think.
if you're a winemaker anywhere in the world and you make rosé, you dream of one day making a Bandol rosé.
yeah.
Or if nothing else, if you're a fan of rosé, maybe not even a maker, your reference point is Bandol. That's kind of the North Star. This sort of like impossible balance between sort of savory, fruit, acid, where it all just happens in this really special way. In even a more distinct way than happens just a little bit inland. In Côte de Provence, Côte d'Aix, where we are. It's just there's just this sort of seductive depth mid palate, and it's really unrepeatable.
And
I think
let's get into it because for people that don't know where it is, it's coastal.
yeah.
It's almost like an amphitheater facing the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Oh, you want to talk about Bandol because I've
Brian, did Brian have coffee this morning or just
Yeah,
Bandol
just
this
a little
morning?
bit. But I've heard Charles talk about if you want to drink good Bandol like rosés, maybe start drinking them right now because the weather's changing.
Yeah, it is. Oh man. So yes, it's very coastal. Just to put in perspective,
Like every vineyard has a view of the Mediterranean.
That's right. So it's essentially this amphitheater facing the Mediterranean. So it has its own unique little microclimate. You can't get more than maybe 2 kilometers, probably maybe 1.5 kilometers from the sea. Most of, and we have 2 vineyards. One of the vineyards is with 200 meters from the sea. So we're, in the sea fog in the morning, looking at the sea. We have one a little further inland. There are several sort of distinct soil types, but it's, limestone is the common denominator. Sometimes a little sandier, sometimes a little more red, sometimes a little more gravel. There is some trias as you kind of get up further, but it's this, it really mild winter. And it is producing less and less wine, unfortunately. It's a sort of a closed appellation in that, we're not allowed to plant anymore. And you're not allowed to irrigate.
Right.
And these crushingly hot and dry seasons are meaning that every year we make less. And there's vine death. The appellation is totally resistant to allowing irrigation. You can irrigate young vines.
So that's what I was wondering, because with the heat going up, do you think that there's going to be a little pushback that maybe they say, you know what, let's change that and let's allow some irrigation? Because what's the other option?
I mean,
That
sounds so logical,
right?
And it's amazing that there's complete resistance to it.
Huh.
There's this idea, of course, if you're irrigating somehow, you're going to dilute the quality of the fruit, the flavor, and that would be a bad thing. I don't see any change in the near future until it's maybe totally desperate. Even
someone like Domaine Tempier, you'd think they would be pushing the agenda a little bit.
Now, I mean, the true story is.
But a question to that is there water?
I was going to say,
so
is there water for them to
want to
use it?
irrigate doesn't mean you can't irrigate, right?
Not a lot of water. Again, another really dry winter. We're supposed to get our, the rain from fall to spring.
Desalinization.
Desalinization. Yeah, right. I mean, so the dirty little secret that, everybody pretends doesn't happen, but does happen. There's a lot of dumping water on the vineyards at night. So you bring in the truck, you dump the water on, and you hope you're in good standing with your neighbor so that they don't call you in. Yeah. So there is a certain, but it's, so there's sort of dodging of how.
Do people ever get busted?
I have not heard of anybody getting busted, but they're, but the consequences are real, and it's it's.
Yeah, what would they do?
You would lose the ability. You would lose. You couldn't call it Bandol. It would be declassified. That's essentially how it would go. So I mean,
which is a big. I mean, that's an expensive.
That's major.
Yeah.
So to go from Bandol, the most expensive fruit in Provence, to it would have to be called IGP. Yeah. IGP Vin de Méditerranée would be what it's declassified to. So I'm not aware of anybody getting busted. I don't think anybody's looking to patrol for it. But someone who dislikes you, that's who can call it in. It's just like when you're adding an addition to your house and you don't have a permit, and I don't know if any of you have ever done this.
I don't know.
Yeah. You got to be concerned.
Nobody
about your
from PRMD is listening to this show, right? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So, now I got the Bandol out of my system.
Yeah.
So let's do a proper introduction.
Yeah, okay.
So, how did you get into wine, and how is it that your dad owned property in France?
Yeah. So my dad is Swiss, from Geneva. His first language is French. His father was the treasurer of the League of Nations. And when the League of Nations closed as World War II started, he took a League of Nations boat to the United States. And actually, the boat ended up going to Canada. They thought they were going to the U.S.
Close enough.
Close enough, yeah. And it was a safe part of the Atlantic. He grew up there, got into finance eventually. I grew up transatlantic. I was born in the UK. My dad would buy broken down businesses, generally bankrupt ones, and try to fix them up. And sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. And anyway, he for sure an entrepreneur. He always loved cooking. He always loved wine. He loved Provence, and he, in particular for Provence, he loved the markets. He wanted an excuse to be in Provence so that he'd go to the markets to buy unbelievable, fruit, vegetables, fish straight out of the Mediterranean. And he's like, well, if I, to have the opportunity to do that, I need a business here. And so like he found a shack of a house that had some vineyards adjacent to it, and you're like, okay, here's my ticket. I'll fix this thing up. And he's an amazing chef, and he had a sense that like I can make wine. I can learn how to do this, and if it's good, you should be able to sell it, right? That seems logical. And so he bought this place. And
what
had.
Year is this?
So this is 92.
It does seem logical,
yeah,
doesn't it?
Yeah.
So simple when you say it like that.
So my dad's a big dreamer. He hired a guy from Bandol to be his mentor, Luc Sorin, Sorin, and pretty quickly they were making surprisingly delicious wines. The trouble was, so the property was in the middle of Provence. The appellation is called Coteaux-Varois. The name of the property was called Chateau Routas. He found some old documents that suggested that, the house that he bought was associated with a chateau at one point, which gave him the right to call it Chateau Routas, which was a real stretch because I can tell you there's no chateau there.
Found some paperwork in a safe.
No, but honestly, it was that's the sort of French process. You have to kind of you can't just call it a chateau because you want to. Like there actually has to be some sort of history to it.
There's a Grateful Dead line, West LA fadeaway, looking for a chateau, 21 rooms, but one will do. Yeah. Right? You got one room, you call it a chateau, you're good.
Let's go. So he so 92 is the first year. Coteaux-Varois, so it's it was really the backwaters of Provence at the time. Provence really was not on the map as a wine appellation for any in the 90s. It's like when I started getting involved, we would talk about wines from Provence. We're like, huh? There was no North American reference point. So I would like, well, you've heard of the Cannes Film Festival, right? Oh yeah, Cannes, yeah. And like that would be kind of the reference point. It was like, it's near the Southern Rhone. Like, okay, and obviously, he was making mostly rosé, and I can tell you that was unsaleable outside of the south of France. So and he, as his first language is French, but as a non-Frenchman, he had zero success selling any wine locally. So
why is that, do you think? Just because there was so many other rosés out there?
There were, certainly not like it is today. I mean, he's just an outsider, right. And he had sort of this sort of international intensity that probably wasn't appreciated. Is a gentle way of saying that. My dad's quite a dynamic fellow. I'm sure he pissed off all sorts of people along the way. Right. And so he
much context in between those
lines.
Oh
my gosh, yeah, you have no idea. I mean, he's amazing, and it's when people say, "Oh, I've met your dad," I sort of like, "Oh no,"
brace yourself.
Like, how did it go? Because you love the guy, or maybe maybe don't. So he realized he had to kind of create this international market because it wasn't going to happen locally, and he had this vision that rosé should be on restaurant lists from San Francisco to Tokyo to New York to LA. It should be everywhere. It's delicious. And of course, at the time, that was not the case. And he was not succeeding at all in it. It was really bumming him out, and he was burning cash and inventory was going through.
How much was he making?
So, early on, it was, about 10,000 cases. And so, I would say he was selling maybe 500 cases. Yeah. So there was a lot of just like, bulking off to the
rosé. It needs
rosé,
to kind of move.
Aged rosé, not what you want. Yeah. So
unless it's Bandol.
Bandol, different. So
but that's a newer phenomenon also.
It is, so until a few years ago, probably 5 years ago, Bandol was 80+% red. Right. And it's totally flipped. Bandol is now 90% rosé, which the people struggle with a little bit.
Which is awesome as much as we all love Bandol Rosé, but
the reds are amazing.
The reds are fucking amazing. Awesome.
Yeah. And actually, and never been better. You think about old school Bandol. On release, tear your mouth to pieces. Right. And these vintages, they're pretty generous up front. And it's not so much a stylistic change in how people are approaching it. It's just, the climate's really playing into these, more red is of course a beastly varietal, but it's sort of taming it a bit. So back to, Rutas was really struggling, and I was going to school in Colorado. I was a ski racer. I was hoping to make the U.S.
What were your events?
So I was a cross country ski racer. They're really nerdy kind. Right. I was a fit guy.
You would have been more nerdy if you would have carried a gun, probably.
Biathlon. That's true. Right. The biathlon's actually kind of badass.
Right.
Yeah. But no, I was nerdy. What can I say? So I was injured, and I'd actually figured out that at school you pay for 20 credits, but they only recommend you have to take 15. And I'm like, well, shit, I'm just going to take 20. And so by year 3, I was basically done with school. And my dad's like, okay, you're going to come work for me now. I need help. And and I was like, well, Dad, I don't, I'd spent some time, in his winery over the years, but not much time. And I was on a totally different track, academically, professionally.
You were kind of like something to do with environmental politics or something, right?
You did some research, yeah. So I in college, I
thank God.
Somebody here.
And Boulder is a nice place to go to school, too.
Boulder's a great place. Oh my gosh,
town,
yeah. No, that's why it takes 7 years for most people.
Is Tulagi still open?
Yeah. It certainly was when I was there. And yes, I logged
John
some
did
time
his
there.
research too.
Yeah. I'm not sure. Boulder's got pretty fancy, so some of the classic spots like that may not be.
Michelin my sister lives there.
There are
Bobby Stuckey's.
Stuckey's,
yeah, exactly.
You were kind of on a different path at the time.
I was really interested in I was studying environmental economics, and I was trying to apply economic approaches to solve environmental disputes. And at the time there was a lot of controversy of the snowy owl. This is in like 97, 98, 96, 97.
Wait, what was the controversy?
The controversy was this: the snowy owl in the Northwest was restricting loggers' ability to clear cut, and environmental groups were trying to protect that habitat. And there's a lot of federal land up there, and so the way, and we could probably go too deep into this. I'll try to say the fast version.
This is the Snowy Owl Show.
The Snowy Owl Show. Yeah, the government has timber auctions, and the highest bidder gets to harvest the trees. And there was an environmental group, a really progressive one, who's like, screw it, we're going in on the auction. We're going to win the auction. We value the habitat more than the loggers do, and so they won the auction, and it turned out that was illegal. The way you actually had to harvest, you had to, and so I wrote a thesis that in college about why they should be allowed. If somebody values it more, then and that's fine. So, and I went to DC and I lobbied it, and we got it passed when I was a student. So nice. It was kind of amazing. Like, wow, this is how things can work. There was a really progressive head of the National Forest Service at that time, Chief Dombeck. This was under Clinton, and which he was generally pretty progressive that way, and it was incredible. So I the chief of the Forest Service is like, you need to work here. So I was kind of heading in that direction, and my dad's like, okay, kid, 12 months. That's all you got to do. Help me out. I'm like, well, what do I do? He's like, go sell something. Like, I don't know anything about selling. He's, where am I supposed to go? And he's
what are
like,
you talking about? You just got laws passed.
Yeah. Well, that's, I guess. Yeah. That's a good point.
Right.
And he's like,
Brian, bringing the dad perspective.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. He's like, you can't do any worse than I'm doing here. So like, have at it. I'm like, well, where do I start? He's like, you're in Colorado, start there. I'm like, okay. And, and I, so naive. And, I was 21. I looked like I was 12, and, so just dove in and like quickly realized like, oh shit, I understand what's going on here.
Did he give you a budget to work with?
There's sort of no budget. I don't think I was even paid. I think that was probably my best value was that I was essentially free.
Perfect introduction to the wine industry.
Yeah. And
I'm still not paid.
Yeah. So he quickly realized like, oh man, like people were not only did people not know about dry rosé or Provence or really anything, they were strongly opposed to it. So this is 99, right? Where like pink wine was sweet, and if you knew a little bit about wine, sweet pink wine is for the unsophisticated drinker, and you want nothing to do with that. You wouldn't want to be caught dead drinking White Zinfandel. Yeah. So, like we had a real problem. Right? This is what my dad was making. I was like, oh shit. So my mom, let me have a sip here.
It's delicious. Right out of it was cold.
Yeah.
And it's Puget Sound outside, so it wasn't like. But once it warmed up a little bit and softened,
we just bottle it. You can't bottle in Bandol before March 1st. So this is air freighted over. It's not even in the U.S.
So it's a little shock going on too.
I would say, it's interesting. About 3 weeks ago, it was pretty gussied up, and then it kind of went into that
goes
shut down. Yeah. You have those moments of like, oh wow, and then like, okay. So my mom was in Waterbury Center, Vermont, where a guy named Ben, another guy named Jerry, started an ice cream company. And when they, which was very much this New England thing, and when the legend goes, when they wanted to, take it national, they bought an Airstream trailer, painted it cow colors, and started going around the country to dead shows and the likes, scooping out ice cream and building this identity and this brand. And so I thought, okay, I need something like that, and I had this idea of like, ooh, pink Cadillac. I don't know why in America, pink Cadillac means anything to anybody.
Elvis
I
think Presley, right?
it did.
But Aretha was because of Bruce Springsteen, and Bruce was the one that kind of brought it back to America's culture. So you weren't a Bruce Springsteen fan, I assume.
Sure. I mean, first concert I went to,
cross-country skier. Of course, he was a Bruce Springsteen fan.
Born in the USA, 1985,
right,
man.
Right.
With Courtney Cox.
Right.
And anyway, so I was like, okay, pink Cadillac, so I went on eBay Motors, which in '99 had basically just started, and they were, entered Cadillac, and there's like, 100 choices. And then it's like, old Cadillac. And there's like, wow, 1965, this, Atlanta, Georgia, car runs okay, but has 19 speakers.
Hardtop,
no, convertible. It was black at the time. And like, wow, so I went down to Georgia. And
The wings on the back?
65, has 59 is the peak, and then it starts going down to 70 where it kind of goes away. So it starts midway.
So there's like a little bit of
there's
wing
a little
left.
bit of wing, yeah. Okay. So it's not the spaceship, the Elvis version. So yeah, I bought the car and I painted it pink and like, okay, here goes nothing, and we didn't have any distribution really, and it was so I drive around and. This is like Google wasn't really. Was Google even in business? I don't know.
You were printing out MapQuest.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Right.
It just and I would like go in a wine shop and like, hey, do you have, who are your distributors? Like, and you're taking notes or yellow pages like distributors. I mean, like that's how we used to do this stuff. It's like word of mouth and like so. And knocking on doors and people didn't know what to make of me. And like this kid who would turn up and I bought some old. Pink tuxedos to go with this whole thing. I'm not a theater guy, by the way. Like this is not my natural thing to do, but it's like it was desperate times. Like we needed to grab attention, and so. But the cool thing was, 99. Like the wine industry was very blue sky. It was growing. There was lots of opportunity. Distributors were opening up all over the place. Portfolios are small. It was it was a great time to make lots of mistakes and still do okay. Like today I have a 18-year-old who's going to Cal Poly to study wine and vit, and which I'm very proud of, and she made that decision for herself. I didn't kick her in the butt to send her.
She'll end up being a lobbyist.
Yeah, she probably. But I think like, man, it's very different time now, and it's a more constricted industry. It's much more professionalized. There's not like I was very lucky to be in this moment where I could make shit tons of mistakes and and no problem. They're like, I could learn and improve, and I think it's going to be a harder moment.
Although on Instagram, you pulling up in the pink suit with the pink Cadillac probably would have been pretty cool.
That's true. That's what, it might have been even viral. Yeah. So anyway, fast forward. I mean, I just started driving around, knocking on doors, and getting a lead, and like picking up a wholesaler, and wine in the back of the trunk, literally, and selling it case by case. And most people would just take pity on me and buy it. They actually it was undeniably good. That was the good news. It was and it was inexpensive. So it was like, it made it kind of easy to take a chance. Like, the shop owner would be a restaurant, and like, well, I'll drink it all if no one else does.
Right. That's what I would say.
Yeah. So, and that was, and I think people, the family spirit and supporting, we made some slow progress. And, I would park the car and then fly to France and, spend some time in the winery and then head back and started like, this industry started getting under my skin, like in the most positive way, that like, wow, this is cool. Like this diversity of all this, this from vineyards to winery time to, getting out and trying to, build a brand. Like, this is cool. And my dad totally gamed me. He, this 12 months, anybody can do anything for 12 months, line that he gave me. It's everybody take notes. It's one to, try on other people. He knew I was going to be hooked pretty quick. And so, but they were really lean years.
That's how my dad got me too, to be honest.
Yeah.
Just 1 year, Sam?
Yeah. We just have the wine we have to sell.
Yeah.
Just sell things.
Help out.
Come help sell this wine.
Yeah. Fair enough. Yeah. It's so yeah, I mean, 12 months pass and like, okay, let's, we're making a little bit of progress and and I started meeting amazing people along the way. Like, you had Joel on the show earlier. So, we picked up, miraculously Chambers and Chambers, the esteemed fine wine wholesaler. Like, they didn't really have anything from the south of France. And so like we filled a niche, and they saw the integrity of the wine. Suzanne did.
People that had been to Cannes and
maybe
with their yachts, and then we're back here and maybe needed a little rosé fix.
Totally. So, so I was at this show and I was looking at some depletions. It was Chambers used to have these great shows in the Presidio, and I was like, I'd heard of this store in Calistoga that had not only bought one case, they bought the next month another case. And then the next month after that, another case. And at the time, this was fucking unheard of. Like, and I was like, what is this? And they're like, oh, that's Joel. He's right over there. Palisades Market. And I'm like, oh my God, I got to meet this guy. And we were fast friends. And that I just, there's such amazing people in this industry. I suppose every industry, but it's like, I like this. I like these people. Like that. So yeah, I was totally hooked. In Joel and I started making wine together. I think you talked about.
For those who haven't heard the past couple weeks ago episode, Joel Gott is what we're referring to.
Yeah. Joel, who turns out is a pretty big deal these days.
Yeah. What's he, 1 million cases or something?
Oh, more. Yeah. More than.
It's the hamburgers.
Yeah. Well, I mean, how about
the
the fact that you can go to a Gott's in the Chase Center? I mean,
right.
Yeah.
Did you walk in the front door or the back door last night? That's what I want to know.
Back door.
Yeah.
The pro. Oh, nice. Yeah. The pro move, by the way, is if you're at the Chase Center for a game or a concert or whatever, put your order in, on the app, and then you can pick it up so you don't have to wait in line. Or order from the Airstream trailer where you get the drinks. You can kind of backdoor it there. Not sure. So
there you go.
Highly recommend best eating in that area.
But when your relationship with Joel, was it when you guys met? Did you say, "Hey, we want to do something with fruit from France," or now I want to sort of transition to making some wines here in the United States?
Well, at first it was just sort of he opened my eyes to California as a wine making, grape growing area. I had no context really. I obviously knew it happened. It was important, but here's a friend who was doing it, and who was hustling. Was without much money, sort of pulling things together. And I had seen my dad almost lose everything, all his life savings through over investing in vineyards and property and in inventory and I didn't have any cash reserves, so I realized like, oh wow, you can just contract fruit, or like you just got to sell it really fast and then hopefully you can cash flow. It never quite works that well or that fast, but in theory, like Joel was kind of doing that. Like,
best laid plans.
Yeah, right. But there was. I think he spoke on that show. We were just listening to it about Three Thieves, which we started. Initially it was sort of a drunken conversation at the picnic table, behind Gott's of like, wouldn't it be cool to, so that post 9/11, the high-end wine market collapsed, and every winery going into that harvest had way too much inventory, and people were just trying to dump to open up tank space, and we knew that because we had friends who were working in cellar guys, and they were like, oh, you could offer 10 cents on the dollar and like steal this wine. Yeah. And we were like, ooh, that's kind of cool. We don't have 10 cents, but we're going to pretend that we did. And we were like, wouldn't it be really cool to put this pedigree wine in the vessel that represents cheap and bad in the US, the jug. And Joel, that's hilarious. And, Joel told some story of his grandfather had put some wine in jugs years ago. And, we've all had those opportunities when we're with pals and you're laughing and you're buzzed and you're like, we're going to do this, we're going to do that. And then you go home and, the next day you're like, what was that conversation? And, but I called Joel the next day. I'm like, we should really do this. Like, this is cool. And that's sort of how it started. And we got another friend named Roger, who we thought was really wealthy, who was going to finance it. Turns out it wasn't. And I don't know how he got it so wrong.
He wasn't wealthy, or he wasn't going to finance it.
Maybe both. Yeah. He was a great guy and we learned a lot from him. We love Roger. But we thought he owned Home Depot. We got it so wrong. It turns out he definitely did not.
He worked at a Home Depot.
Yeah, he worked at
In fact, he just had an orange apron.
Along with Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh God. Oh, Tucker.
But Charles, so those were 1 liter bottles, 1 liter jugs, right?
Yeah. So we found it was a mold for olive oil use in Italy, for the. We were not going to be able to compete in the half-gallon, Rossi style. Though we had these amazing T-shirts and promos that said "Carlo who," and that image of our jug. But we just, it was just this. We were naive. We had nothing to lose really. We had no reputation, and it was just like, it was a laugh. And the wine was legit.
Yeah.
Lots of NDAs. Like, okay, you're going to buy this wine. And you're not allowed to say who you bought it from.
Have those NDAs expired?
Yeah.
Can you drop some names?
I think too many of these people probably listen to your podcast. I'm gonna avoid that one. But it was sort of this unbelievable opportunity, and we jumped on it, and we, like out of the gate, like people were hungry for it, and we would allocate it to fine wine shops. Which is like, what? Fine wine shop, putting in a stack of jugs in the front of the store. I mean, it was like ridiculous. And it pissed off some people, and other people thought it was...
And you guys were some of the first wineries to go to the Tetra boxes,
That's
right?
true, yeah. And soon after that, so we had sort of so much swagger after, like, we just pulled off a luxury jug. Like, we could do anything, And Roger had noticed in Europe, Italy in particular, that a huge chunk of grocery store wine sales in Italy is sold in Tetra Pak. So essentially, like a soy milk carton, right? The carton costs less than a cork. And
it's paperboard. It's recyclable.
Absolutely.
Good.
Yeah. No, it's lightweight. It's so we can eliminate the cost of glass label foil and just sell the wine, And we were like, that's cool. Not only was it it wasn't just novelty. It was like made sense. Yeah. So we dove in, again, very naively, but thinking like there's something to this, and no one else is going to dare. So like why not us? Bandit is 450,000 cases at this point.
Holy
Bandit
cow.
is a brand. It's become pretty big brand. Which there were a lot of years where we made plenty of mistakes there, and boxes exploding, tops falling off, and but we stuck with it with somehow.
I had excellent box wines in France.
Yeah,
I mean, it's delicious.
It's the fastest. So sadly, the French are drinking less and less wine, largely because there are a lot of the last prime ministers of France have been very restrictive on alcohol and DUI levels are they're just it's really restrictive, and the youth are drinking way less. But one of the few growth areas is rosé and bag-in-box, and it's so you see some good options there. Yeah.
As this is going on, and you're kind of having a relationship with Joel Gott, what's going on with your dad's wine? The rosé.
So in 2005, a Scottish billionaire who owned the Glasgow Rangers and steel companies knocked on my dad's door and said, "Hey, I'd love to buy it." And my dad's like, "Well, it's not really for sale, but sure." I can actually get it out of this having not lost my shirt and maybe make some money. It's a beautiful, there were a lot of woods and this fellow loved to ride his motorcycle around and hunt and do all that stuff. And so he loved the property and I think largely bought it for that. And so 2005, it was the same year we started the Bieler Prairie Fils, which we're tasting here now in X. So what we were finding was that the cooler vintages in Côte d'Ivoire made particularly exciting rosé and particularly bad red wine. But when we wanted to continue, we really just wanted to focus on rosé, forget about the red wine because they're sort of different tasks. Certainly different set of vineyard requirements and climate requirements. So we wanted to find the latest ripening, the sort of the coolest part of Provence, and it was very clear that Côte d'Aix en Provence is the highest elevation vineyards on average. It is the latest ripening. This is an area that was when in 2005 when we started there was mostly planted to Syrah. Rosés at that time, people were having to deacidify most years. That is certainly not the case anymore. But we were
changed.
I mean, these warmer, drier years. Climate. I mean, it's that's not very long ago. I mean, the shift is pretty dramatic. So 2005.
Okay.
So when we were starting, we would have searing acidity where we'd have to think about deacidifying, and Grenache was not. There was some Grenache, but not much. Cinsault wasn't planted at all. These grapes didn't ripen, or they certainly historically were not ripening that well.
Aix-en-Provence. Will you talk sort of geographically where that is? Because it's not far from Marseille, right?
Well, not far at all. Yeah. It's inland. It's only probably as a crow flies, maybe 50 miles from Bandol.
Right.
But it's inland. So there's a mountain right outside of the city of Aix-en-Provence called the Mont Saint-Victoire, and it's this very dominant mountain. And all of our vineyards are in this town called Venelle, which is just on the ridge off of the Mont Saint-Victoire. So it's at about 1,400 feet, and it's the peak heat of the day, I would say, is probably not far different than Bandol or Côte de Provence, but it cools off a lot at night, and it just takes longer to warm. I mean, it's the classic mountain profile, and bud break is many weeks later. We pick many weeks later, so it's we wanted to focus on rosé, and we've been configured. So we found. My dad didn't want to make the error again of buying lots of vineyards and losing it. And I was learning already with Joel here, hey, you can contract fruit. You can, if you become, an important contractor with a grower, they'll do whatever you want. And if you commit to long-term contracts, they'll maybe they don't want to plant Cinsault, but you commit to 10 years, they'll plant Cinsault. And we've had that relationship. So we've been, we started with 5,000 cases. This year it'll be about 100,000 cases of this wine, and we've grown really with vineyards in the Venelle area, that high point, about 1,400 feet. But we've been planting. Well, now it's majority Grenache, It's Cinsault is the next largest proportion. We've been planting Claret. We've been planting Grenache Blanc. A lot of Roll Vermentino. And we're not doing that, by the way, to manage color. We're doing it to sort of add aromatic complexity. We're trying to add kind of a more sort of floral lift.
So the Vermentino and the Claret are going into rosés.
Yeah, and so
Cool.
so the rule is you can't make white wine and blend it in. You have to co-ferment. You have to be some red grapes involved. You can actually kind of navigate around that, but technically
Rules are made to be bent.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. But generally, everything's picked at night. Everything comes, by 7 a.m. Pretty much all the fruit's in for the day. And we have 2 presses. Early as we had 1. And so it's like, as it comes in, whatever vineyard, it's all going in together. And, I now make wine with Charles Smith in Eastern Washington. And he always has said, and I totally agree, that, if grapes are destined to be together, ultimately, the sooner you can integrate them, the more cohesive the final wine. And so we're really, it's on occasion where we have like a truly special vineyard, we'll sort of press it off separately, but generally speaking, if it's ultimately all coming together, we're co-fermenting a lot. So yeah.
And then more and more, aren't you starting to do kind of a using lees where you used to get the solids out? Now you're kind of integrating them a little bit more.
You've been doing
process.
you've been doing your research.
Yeah.
So early on. So for me, the very best rosé has a bit more mid-palate depth. You don't want it to be heavy, clunky, but aromatically rosé, is the good ones are kind of within sort of a similar range. But anyway, I focus on texture a lot. Yeah. And initially, we did lots of post-fermentation lees work as a way to kind of build volume, and that helped to a certain extent. But
like batonnage
kind of
stirring in barrels.
Though, and actually at Routas we even did some neutral barrel fermentation as sort of another way to kind of add an oxidative texture. But it only did so that actually worked quite well, but it's expensive and a lot of labor. And I'm so value oriented that I have to keep that in mind. What we've been finding, however, is with these really hot, dry vintages, there's really zero disease pressure. The fruit's coming in super clean, and the solids are actually quite interesting. So we're pressing, sending to the tank, chilling down the tank. Traditionally, you get rid of the solids and you just ferment the clean juice, and we're increasingly keeping the solids in, or we will 24 hours, 48 hours, we will bring the temperature real cold and we'll suck off the bottom, put it back on top, and just keep the solids in suspension for a few days, and it's allowed sort of this a bit more volume to build, and I think it's added a textural component that I think is pretty cool, because aromatically it's so delicate, fresh and bright, and mid palate it's like there's a bit. It's a bit creamier.
I mean, I assume your presses you're pressing things whole cluster.
We are, yeah.
And so you can do that now, because when you're whole clusters, there's less solids in the first place.
There's no stem,
right?
Basically.
And so you don't. Part of the reason why you racked is because if you took too many solids, the fermentation was to start to stink.
Yeah.
Right, and they go reductive.
Yeah.
And so this has allowed you to do that. It's awesome.
Yeah.
I mean, the wine is beautifully aromatically. It has a little bit of kind of meatiness, gaminess that I really like. Yeah, that's
Thanks.
Very cool.
Yeah.
But what absolutely minerality also. So I have one real quick question. Last year at Hospice, there was a seminar on Ventoux.
Okay. Yeah.
Also high elevation. Also cooler and
depending on where you are.
Okay, so I was just hoping that you could maybe touch
So my
based
dad
on
lives
where
up there.
this is to where you guys are.
Yeah. So Ventoux is quite a bit further north.
Okay.
So Ventoux is, it's sort of Côte d'Aron, but it's been kind of carved off as not Côte d'Aron, because it's considered inferior a little bit, which is really not fair. Ventoux is a pretty huge growing area, and there's a it's a big range of quality and sites. So So
it's not really. I mean,
was Nicole from Chien Bleu? Was she on that panel?
She was. Yes.
Yeah. So they they're up.
We love Nicole.
Yeah. No, she's great.
Friend of the pod.
Yeah.
Greatest episode ever. Go way back to
Well,
when was that? Pre-COVID, 2018, 2019.
Yeah, big
back
party at
patio.
Fig
We
Grilled
live during brunch.
Yeah. And by the way, I just started. Sorry,
She's charming.
Total
She's charming.
sidetrack.
Right. We're all just have a.
I love Nicole.
I know. Well, I just
Crush
got
Wednesday.
caught up on Succession, so I started watching the first.
Oh yeah.
Did you guys see that in the first episode, season
I
1,
did see
episode
that.
1?
Yes, I did.
When they're pouring wine
Some
at the
Chien
dinner
Bleu.
table,
Yeah.
it's the
Chien
Chien
Bleu.
Bleu.
Yeah.
Oh,
I did see that. I'm like, Nicole, what did you pay for that?
I wonder.
Oh. No, she's
fine
amazing.
minds
She's
for
amazing.
fine wines.
Yeah.
No,
My dad lives up there, right nearby her. Actually, he's in Baume de Venise, and they're, anyway. They're a unique, Ventoux story and location, and then there's some. You get into the flats, and it's a little less, and people pushing volume. But
that area up there is as you said, Côte d'Aron, where you're at now is more Provençal.
Way
totally different.
Total, quite different. Yeah.
Oh,
quite
one's
different.
in the mountains, one's on the coast.
Right.
Yeah.
I still don't know how the hell they get their grapes out or do anything.
Oh yeah, at Chien Bleu, yeah.
Helicopter.
They don't. They wait till it's wine. It's easy to move.
Bulk it out.
All right, so can we get into Charles and Charles?
Oh sure,
So,
yeah.
So the other Charles, who has
he been on?
on the show as
great.
well, sat in that chair that you're sitting in right now.
Did he have a pink microphone?
I don't remember.
We'll have to consult the record.
Yeah.
Where's James?
I remember we had a little trouble getting him into the microphone.
Okay,
He's kind of a lean
sure.
backer.
Yeah, right.
Well, he was
right.
lean everywhere.
Yeah, like well, he's got a lot to say.
Right. So how is it that you guys first met?
I mean, I'd say we initially met sort of the same way I met Joel, through our common wholesalers. And, it sort of at the end of the night after we've all been there, right? After the distributor thing or whatever, you end up at the bar and like-minded people sort of find a corner of the bar and start drinking mezcal. I think that's sort of how it goes.
Anything but wine.
Yeah. And I was like, this guy's cool. And, what led me to Washington was not him. I had this vision that the U.S. because at the time, in the early 2000s, there were 3 rosés that I was aware of that were proper. In my opinion, proper is that balance again. A little bit of red fruit, lots of savory acid holding it together.
What were
Rob
they?
Sinsky's Van Gris.
Yeah.
Ted Lemon's rosé.
Does he still make rosé, by the way?
Probably not.
I don't think so. Yeah.
Because it's too inexpensive. Maybe you can't charge on that. I don't know.
Literary rosé.
Yeah.
I'm down.
Right.
Yeah. The Phelps had that Mistral program. Was making a pretty interesting rosé. It was sort of a darker profile Monterey. Randall Graham was also making quite a bit of rosé. He was getting kind of commercial. I didn't find it quite as distinctive as the others, but in my opinion, it's like, no one was, there was just a lot of sort of bleed off, like, I'm going to concentrate my red tanks and, hey, I got some rosé. Let's put it in a bottle. Yeah. Let's, and it was there was not much purposeful rosé. And so like, obviously one can do that. So initially I was looking all over California for, this equivalent sort of Côte d'Aix kind of this cooler site. And, there's plenty of, mountain fruit. And you know what? The mountain fruit's fucking expensive. Yeah. And so, I'm a, not wine at any cost guy. I'm like value is a factor. So like, okay, that's not working. So let's go north.
Because what are you shooting for a bottle of rosé? If someone gets it in a store, what are you basically shooting for price-wise?
Well, at that time, I wanted it to be, 10, 11, 12, 13 bucks. Yeah. That was the goal. To me, to get people to not hesitate to open it on a Tuesday night when you're having leftovers, to me, like that's at a price where pretty much everybody can get into it. Yeah. And that's for me where the rubber meets the road, Like I love the great wines of the world and will spend stupid money on those, but I don't think most people should have to do that. Yeah. So to bring authenticity and soul and sense of place and varietal and at a reasonable cost, that's awesome. And that's what, Joel and I have built essentially our businesses on. Yeah. How do we find that and scale it and be efficient? So, I went north to Oregon, and like, okay, Pinot Noir makes pretty good rosé. But, cost of fruit, still kind of high. Yeah. And there's all these restrictions of, like, okay, forget about that. So we'll go further north, more, and then like, holy cow, Columbia Valley, like, blew my mind. I'm sort of not aware of it. This huge diurnal temperature shift, cost of fruit, incredibly modest for the quality coming in. And I knew one dude up there, and his name's Charles, and he has longer hair than me and generally swears a bit more than me and raises a bit more hell than me typically. And I was like, hey, this is the vision. This is how we're doing it in Provence. I'm certain we can do something cool up here.
But not a lot of Grenache.
Not that you're right. Very little. And the reason, of course, is it's too cold. Yeah. Syrah ripens really well up there consistently because it doesn't need as much heat. So we went after, there were essentially zero Grenache. The only Grenache you see, save what we have planted since, is, high end. So people are, they'll cut the yields down to a ton to the acre or two. And then like, you can ripen it then from warm sites. That is shifting. But anyway, so I was like, hey, I think we should do this. And he didn't hesitate for a second. He was all in. And so we were, we went after growers who planted Syrah in too cold a place, and they couldn't sell it to anybody who wanted to make red wine. We were like, perfect. And Charles had a vineyard that he was sort of auditioning for a red program that was just not cutting it. It was too lean. It was lighter in color, and all these negatives were like exactly positives for what we were doing. So
is this all Syrah?
So initially it was 100% Syrah. So now we've gotten into some long contracts. And again, that thing, like if you develop a relationship with a grower and you're willing to have long contracts, but you want to plant, and as long as they can like pencils out. So we have some Grenache here now. We have some Mourvèdre as well, which is, which would not work for red wine, but for this style, it works great. A lot of this is all above. So Washington has sort of two, breaking. Put simply, there's sort of below 1,000 feet. It tends to be kind of sandy soil, and then eventually some volcanic. About over 1,000 feet, it's some alluvial, and then volcanic, sort of more volcanic influence. Of course, then you get into Walla Walla and there's the rocks, but that we're not in that area at all. So most of this fruit at this point is in the ancient lakes area. So 1,100 feet, it's where Charles started his Kung Fu Girl Riesling. Right. It was originally planted mostly to Riesling, and it's sort of expanded. And we have fruit from all over the place, but that's a big core of it.
I mean, this wine really kind of sings Syrah, and it's that really, really juicy fruit where obviously the French wines are a little more complex and whatnot. But yeah, again, just so mouth pleasing.
For reference sake, when are you picking Syrah in Columbia Valley to make rosé?
Well, it depends on the vintage.
Yeah, okay, of course.
So typically, we're at 12% alcohol here, right? On average. So 22, we're 11 and a half, and we picked in October. It was cold. Wow. Like last spring was
super cold.
So it just kept snowing and raining, and like, oh my God, this is the late ripeners. If you didn't cut your yields way back, you were toast. Like you were. But for making this kind of wine, no problem.
Perfect. Right?
Yeah, great, fantastic.
Let it ride.
So generally speaking, it's mid-September is when we would start, and we're bringing it's 21 bricks, kind of. It's 22. Like we're not, we're looking for flavor, and I'm happy to keep the alcohol down. Incidentally, I'm essentially colorblind, and with rosé, there's a lot of color discussion. Particularly in Provence, there's this obsession on visual beauty, and if it's paler, people have this idea it's better, it's more sophisticated, it's more delicate, it should garner a higher price, and as winemakers,
Napa Cab,
the opposite of but obviously you can manipulate that in the wine, right? There's a lot of things you can add to pull out color. You can certainly add lots of white wine to manage color, and for me, color doesn't mean anything to me. So we really focus on character, because a lot of, as a lot of the decisions one makes to manage color are pretty much at the cost of the flavor. Yeah, so it just doesn't work. That's just the way it is. It's so you kind of like pick what's your priority, and so one thing I find cool is, you know, if you look at the sort of range of colors, they're pretty reflective of the varietal of how that, you know, Syrah has this a bit more electric profile. You know, we kind of move into this more kind of copper hue. Again, I'm saying this as if I'm seeing this. This is what people say. So like, okay, right. It's sort of pinkish. I don't know.
That's the great irony of all of this.
Yeah.
Pink Cadillac. They didn't know it was a pink Cadillac. It was just a Cadillac.
Yeah, it was like, I think it was still black actually. It was like, yeah, Charles, it's pink.
I mean, it is amazing that, you know, we do get caught up so much in color,
Right.
And I think a lot of times Rhone blends suffer from that the most, in that, you know, people
keep adding Syrah.
They keep adding Syrah and then losing the Grenache character.
Yeah.
And just be happy with the color that you have and appreciate it.
Mm-hmm.
And the color is also reflective of the vintage, right? Some vintages
it should be.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Should be.
It should be.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
You shouldn't be looking at your past wines going, how do we get back to that color?
Yeah.
You should just be happy with it.
And you know, but particularly when it comes to rosé, and I'm emphasizing this because, you know, I think a lot of consumers out there aren't aware of this, and I really encourage consumers to be open to a range of pink color, and, you know, it's like, you know, classic, you know, rosés from Tavel. Well, it's Syrah, and there's you know, Syrah gives a bit more color than Grenache, and there typically is a little bit of skin contact. They're darker, and, you know, for the last 10 years, Tavel has almost gone out of business they couldn't sell wine because it was too dark. And it's like, that's tragic.
Great wine.
Tragic, you know, and it's
Getting
like
me a bottle of Moderé right now.
Yeah, exactly.
I probably said it wrong, but whatever.
Moderé, yeah, that's right. Yeah, the
Perfect.
you know,
Motorhead?
Motorhead.
yeah, dude, hell yeah. No, but I think the tide is starting to shift, but there's still so much color discussion in Provence in it, and it's made a lot of Provence rosés pretty fucking boring in my opinion, with such emphasis on beauty. You know, you'll see, you know, more concern about like the custom mold of the glass and the paleness of the, like, oh,
Yeah.
What in the Brad Pitt are you talking about?
yeah.
Looks good next to the yacht.
Yeah. So listeners out there, you know, be open to the range and have that part of the experience, and paler, darker, it's just different expression and not difference in quality.
Yeah.
We used to do a tasting at Benziger once in a while with black glasses. They had all these black glasses.
Oh, yeah.
And it was very cool to taste
Yeah, that
without
double
that
blind
sense. Yeah.
glass. Yeah.
Brian's into the
Brian's
red. Let's
moving
get
on to the
going.
We're shifting
Brian's
it.
keeping this.
Brian's having a good morning.
Yeah.
Well, I assume Charles has got some appointments today, so
there
I'm
will
trying
be
to
some appointments.
keep
I
him
appreciate
moving a
that,
little
Brian.
bit.
Thank you. Yeah. So we're shifting here. We just, you know, we're jumping around on so many stories, but
That's the idea.
Yeah.
Welcome to the podcast.
So you know, we actually, first couple of vintage up in Côte d'Aix, we actually did make some red wine, and it was just kind of lean and not that interesting, and, you know, and it proved the point of why we were there, to focus on, you know, we want to pick in late September, October. We want it to be barely 12%, all the things, you know. So I gave up making, you know, red wine around there for some time, until some friends of mine, the Lavo brothers, who are in, they're in the Rhone. They're Violès is the town where they're in. They make a bunch of wine all over the southern Rhone. I guess a little in the north too. They started buying up a lot of land in a town called Valréas. Valréas is a Côte d'Rhône village, and it's you know, it's probably the least well-known Côte d'Rhône village out there, and for good reason. And I didn't really understand, you know, why, you know, everybody sort of thought Valréas was inferior, until and he's like, Charles, just let's come check it out. Well, okay. So, and come to realize, Valréas is the breaking point from the south to the north. This is the point where you shift from Grenache dominance to Syrah. And Valréas is not valley floor. It's at about 1,200 feet on the edge. Well, the town is closer to the valley floor, but the vineyards are up the hill.
This is on the east or the west side of the river.
So this is on the east side of the river. Yeah. So you're there's Carène, Rasteau, a little bit to the south. This is the breaking point, and it's like, oh, I get it. On warm vintages, Valerias makes damn cool wines. On cooler vintages, they're kind of lean and hard and bitter, and like that's why it had this reputation. And so with these progressively warm, dry years, Valerias is moving into the zone of ripening Grenache really well most every year. So there is a little bit of Syrah here, but it's Grenache dominant. To me, it was like, oh my God, this is the future. This is it. And it has been some of the least expensive land in the Rhone. That's quickly changing as people are realizing, like, the trends are playing into this area. So are
you able to co-ferment these?
Yeah, so it is co-fermented in concrete. It's native yeast. We there's about a quarter of it whole cluster. It's probably 30 some days on the skins, and finished in concrete. What's cool is Grenache is now ripening there consistently, and yet it's retaining sort of freshness and acidity, which, valley floor fruit has gotten pretty high pH, pretty soupy kind of, and this is not, this Valerias is fresh.
So what is the price of this wine, and like how many cases is this widely found in the United States?
So we started making this just 3 years ago. We probably make 6,000 cases of it.
Yeah.
Price is probably $14.
Wow. There you go.
Yeah, it's pretty inexpensive.
I mean, all right. You know what? Let's lose this episode and
let's
talk about
it. Don't buy these wines.
Question for you, Charles. You mentioned you had a comment.
Spend $60 on our Grenache instead. Damn it!
It's moving into the zone of ripening.
Yeah.
How is climate change showing itself right now?
Oh man,
France?
I mean, it's you want to wind me up. I mean,
Absolutely.
so that's, I mean, the one advantage, I think there are a lot of advantages of not being tied to a property, which you have to kind of, react to. I can move places, I can shift. I don't have to just sort of optimize my plot of land. I can, find these sort of fringe areas. I mean, this will be my 23rd vintage. And from starting in the Routas days, I guess 98 was my first year there, and the shift is really dramatic, and the Rhone, Provence Rhone is particularly dramatic. What I've seen in 23 years is pretty remarkable. Again, back to the Côte d'Aix, we used to deacidify. It used to be mostly Syrah, now it's predominantly Grenache and Cinsault, and here, Valerias, Valerias is kind of a joke. And now it's like Valerias is cool, and it's these sort of, these Côte Rôtie used to be so vintage specific, and it's like banging every year now, where it's, Washington is exciting for so many reasons, and it's been a big beneficiary of this. I mean, still, it's northern latitude, right? So by sort of mid-September, there's much less light, and it generally cools off a lot, so that's kind of a limiting factor. But Washington used to lose a vintage I don't know, every 4 years, or have major frost. Like, that's not happening anymore. I am Bandol, I guess, is the exception, where this is an area where, so I don't know how much longer, from a volume point of view, but it's also, acidity, keeping, a fresh wine, like in 10 years, can we do that? We might have to start picking in, early August. And, at that point, will the flavors be there at that point? I don't, but I think a lot about it. Joel and I make a wine in Argentina. What we've seen there over the last 12 years, called the Show. There's a North Coast cab, and then there's a mountain. When we started, all the fruit was, from Luján de Cuellar, kind of the classic. It's where Catena is based. It's sort of the traditional, sort of the Napa Valley. Malbec's an early ripener, and so we were finding, like, a lot of sugar well before there was much flavor, and like like this is not the place anymore. It's like, so the shift has been to the Uco Valley, which is, at about 1,200 feet, and you can push back, ripening by sort of 3 weeks or more, and get flavor and get sugar and flavor to kind of line up. Everywhere. I mean, without exception, I'm making some wine in New York State, in the Finger Lakes, and what's happening there is, you can ripen, we think of it as Riesling country. We can make pretty damn good Cab Franc now.
Say Cab Franc country.
People, Louis Barriot from Saint-Côme is making Pinot Noir and Riesling in the Finger Lakes now. There is still a rain issue in the fall. That's a factor in the Finger Lakes. So sometimes there's some forced pick because you got rot problems.
It scared the shit out of me when I saw the Loire River completely dry. You could walk across the entirety.
Yeah. I mean,
amazing. What's going on?
We make a wine. I don't know if we're going to get to it. You spoke of it when you talked to Joel. A wine called Shatter, which is from a town called Maury in the Roussillon, right on the border of France and Spain. The water restriction, it hasn't rained in a couple of years now, essentially. And the water is so restrictive that, like if you have a pool, it's empty. You're not allowed there. There's no water. You're not allowed to, certainly can't irrigate. It's getting, this particular area is really dramatic. Provence is not getting much rain either, but the Alps are getting some snow, and there's a good sort of system of canals that are bringing down.
Is it all snow melt there? No underground aquifers or anything?
I mean, there are some aquifers. It's like California. There are aquifers, thanks to the snow. And then there are reservoirs and canals. It's similar sort of setup actually from, what the Sierras deliver for Central Valley and so forth. But the trend is scary. The trend is scary.
Any more that I can say to wind you up?
I mean, keep throwing them at me.
A little birdie told me that we should ask about something about running around the Grand Canyon.
Oh yeah. I like to run.
Is that little birdie who's sitting in the other room?
Yeah, that's a big birdie. Yeah. So I was remember the nerdy skiing guy, and I like to run. I love our national parks, marathons and longer. So I try to,
those guys.
Yeah. Try to balance all the alcohol that here we are at 9 a.m. and we have 10 bottles open.
Depends on what time zone you're in, I guess. It's 5 o'clock somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, there's 10 bottles, but some of them are water bottles.
And it's rosé. Mm-hmm. It's breakfast wine.
Yeah, it's 12% alcohol. We're fine. My wife's from Arizona, and I love the Grand Canyon. And once a year, I try to run over and back, the rim to rim to rim. Or at least go down to the river, touch it, and get back. It's sort of like a grounding. It's my meditation. I'm not religious, but it's so I have some clarity when I do things like that, and I make it a priority. Whether it's there, generally that's once a year. But I mean, we gotta find inspiration. Sometimes when you're so in it, you kind of you lose sight of things. And you kind of gotta clear your head and let just things come to you. And
where are you living?
I'm actually based in New York City.
Okay.
Which is a little bit strange considering most of what I do is not in New York City. My wife is a senior editor at the Wine Spectator. She reviews the Rhone in South France and Germany and Austria and the Loire and all sorts of. She's been a wine writer for a long time and always needed to be in New York. Yeah. And she's like 3 big airports, anywhere, direct flights anywhere you want to go.
Halfway between
California
the two.
And
France.
7 hours to France.
Upper West Side.
So we're right by Columbia. Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Does she bring home some wine every once in a while?
Every night, it's she's right now meeting with FX Pickler, which I think probably the best in my opinion, Austrian winemaker. Yeah. One of the amazing things, is on an average night, she'll bring back, 10 wines that sort of pre-selected from her reviewing that day, and I'll taste it blind. And we do lots of blind tasting, and it really kind of, I think everybody should blind taste more, frankly, if just kind of sharpen our palates and sort of broaden.
Oh my God, I'm gonna break one.
our knowledge. And so yeah, tons of blind. I mean, every in the fall I'm not around a lot these seasons, but winter and spring we do a lot of tasting. So yeah, I'm based in New York City.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So I went ahead and I had already poured the cab, but I dumped it out because we wanted to do the Grenache.
Yeah. So to the Roussillon. So I think Joel had said he gave the backstory. It was Dave Finney who loves the hedonistic wines, who like, oh my God, these old vine Grenache planted in black schist.
When he flew in at night one time, promised his wife he wasn't going to do anything stupid, ended up buying a vineyard, and then not letting the word get out because he didn't want other people to move in,
right? Yeah,
and kind of purchase the grapes from that area.
I mean, hot, dry valley. Grenache there was planted for sweet wine, for fortified wine. That category doesn't do very well anymore. So it's really, most people are making dry wine there. And I mean, the dirty little secret is this Moree Valley, I would say probably 80%, I'm pulling this number out of my ass, but it's got to be damn close to it, exits Moree in tanker trucks at night. And it goes as sort of the Petite Syrah of France. Like if you want concentration, because it's just concentrated, structured fruit that a lot of wines would benefit from. And there are more and more talented winemakers coming through, but it's schist delivers this kind of cast iron backbone, and then the fruit on top of it. The issue is, with only a few clusters per vine, and it's all hand picked, like the sugars, we can never get the fruit in fast enough, and you start picking at 25, 26 breaks before you know it, it's at it's coming in at 29, like, oh my G. So and Dave really leaned into that, and I got involved in 2017 with a slightly different perspective, and I respect the hell out of Dave and what he's done. For me, if you're picking so ripe, you start losing sense of what the variety is, and you start losing sense of the soil profile. So I wanted to reveal that more, try to find that balance. So it's still 15+% alcohol. There is a little bit of new French oak, but we've been backing off that to kind of find that balance between the sweet barrel quality and still, like, it's got to be black schist. We make 6,000 cases of this or something like that.
The bouquet is so different from the Grenache blend. To this shatter. This had the strongest bouquet I've smelled in a long time.
It's also probably fairly recently bottled.
That's true. That's true. Though they're both 21s.
Okay.
This is 21, isn't it?
I think the Côte d'Aron is just more perfumey and just more expressive.
Yeah.
Olive and carbon and fruit, and
where the Cadillac is just like
it's
intense.
beastly.
Yeah.
I mean that so we have twice as big a crop here. This is limestone, a limestone vineyard and a Gallet Riverstone vineyard. It's it doesn't quite, and it's it's another expression of Grenache.
Totally.
Yeah.
Well, I think that one of the vineyards Dave bought was, there's like 100-year-old Grenache vines on that property.
Yeah.
I've had the Ferrion, the old vine stuff that they do in specific vintages.
Yeah. No, I mean, they're really monumental wines.
Yeah.
And thanks to Dave and Joel that I have the opportunity to spend a bunch of time there.
Yeah, probably a nice place to visit, right?
Pretty cool. And actually, for me as sort of the traveling dude, it's only 2 hours from Barcelona. Mm-hmm. So, I fly in through Barcelona, and that's sort of been like, Barcelona's cool. I mean, like, talk about eating, drinking, and festive nature. Yeah,
that's Party City, man.
Party City, great. It's cool.
You drop in for I don't know, a meal at 10 o'clock at night there, man.
Well, they're only opening at 10 o'clock.
Yeah, that's so funny.
Yeah. There's no 9:30 reservation.
Everything tapas, However, you can still spend a lot of money on tapas and wine.
Oh, heck yeah, you sure can. Yeah, it's well, there's a lot of talented chefs.
Coming over.
Yeah. So we're moving. We're moving here back to Washington State, I guess, for the closer.
Closed with Cabernet.
Closed with Cabernet. So initially Charles and I were really focused on rosé. That's all we made for the first several years. Along the way, we started making Cab and Syrah blends. So back at Chateau Routas, my dad's original property, we made rosé. We made Cab Syrah blends. My dad's
wait, there was Cab Syrah blends at Chateau.
Yeah, there were. Yeah. So my dad was in love with. So at the time in the 90s, there was one breakout winery that that sort of disobeyed the appellation rules essentially and defied all expectations, and that's Trevelin, Domaine Trevelin, which is Cab and Syrah. And interestingly, it's they have no destemmer, so it is whole cluster Cab and whole cluster Syrah. Always has been.
I like every year, regardless.
Every year, that's the way it is.
Because that's what they got.
That's what they got. And they could buy a destemmer this way, but they're not interested, which is pretty cool. So, but that was the like this they're they actually like they were declassified. They were essentially vendor paid. Right. And my dad was so inspired by what they were doing. He's like, well, we need a Cab Syrah. So we made Cab Syrah, and Charles makes some co-fermented Cab and Syrah blends, the Creator, some pretty and Syrah ripens very consistently in Washington State, pretty early, and Cab is a late ripener, and they're really even in a warm year, cool year, Cab can have a kind of a range of quality. Syrah always sort of holds it together. So in a warmer year, we'll have a little more Cab. In a cooler year, we'd have a little bit more Syrah. It really worked well. But there is one particular vineyard that year in, year out, the Cab has always been a standout for us in Washington. It's a vineyard farmed by the Monson family. Goose Ridge is their winery. Goose Mountain is their sort of the premier kind of part of their property of the Goose Ridge Vineyard. And what's interesting is it's contiguous with Red Mountain. Red Mountain is considered the premier Cabernet growing spot in Washington. And incidentally, Red Mountain is not a mountain, and it's not red, but it's called Red Mountain. And so the
a brown hill.
Yeah, pretty much. And it's a beautiful spot. Don't mean to take away its integrity. The Monson's ranch is just to the south of it. Again, contiguous. But it's most of the vineyards are north facing and east facing, and at about 1,100 up to as high as 1,400 feet. So it's a little bit of a cooler spot. So we picked several weeks later than I would say most people on average would pick on Red Mountain. So just I'm into slowing down the ripening, hanging it longer, keeping sugars more in check. I mean, this is 13.5% alcohol. So there is a tiny bit of Syrah here, probably 8 or 9%. And so this is we were removing stems here. It's whole berry. It's native, fermented, probably 40 days on the skins in stainless, big stainless tanks, and then we're aging it in 100% old barrel. So we're buying old 15-year-old Delicado barrels and so forth, and the goal is to kind of bring purity of fruit, and yet bring a little bit more sort of rounded concentration, but minus the toast and that profile.
So was this a negotiation, or was it alphabetical to go Charles Bieler and Charles Smith?
You're trying to start a fight, aren't you?
Not at all. I'm just a question.
Yeah, no, it's there's a lot of, well, which Charles are you? Are you the first Charles? Are you the second Charles? No, I have, Charles is he has a reputation of being quite theatrical and but when it comes to, actually it was Parker who said this, when it comes to winemaking, he's as serious as a heart attack. And that's the case. And I've learned a lot from him, and his approach particularly to red winemaking. And he's been my guide in Washington State, and he remains a close friend. And Washington sort of amazes me every year, and I think it's sort of, we're on chapter 2 of this 10 chapter story, and I think there, as more talent comes, as we know, we as certainly, in my story in Washington's early days, I'm sure there are a lot of other people who've been there much longer who probably have more played out. But it's exciting. There's water. BC. So Eastern Washington, it doesn't rain really, but tons of water coming down from BC. BC has not had any. They've had the consistent winters. The Columbia River brings all that water down every year. There's not the, this is 2020, right? So 2020, we know in Oregon, lost vintage, fires all over the place. Yeah. Eastern Washington doesn't have the same amount of fuel. It's not forested. It's sagebrush.
It's like prairie.
It's prairie. Yeah. So things can burn, but it burns through real fast. And so there's generally not the smoke impact. So we lost, 2020, the winds were blowing from the south and bringing up Oregon smoke, but at a really high level. So we lost probably 10 days of ripening as it sort of blocked out the sun. Yeah. But we didn't have the flavor impact. It's pretty, Washington's amazing. And I'm frustrated that the U.S. consumer is all eyes on California, like Washington, what?
No, we really want to get up there, and I think we keep talking about it, but we're and we have a bunch of recommendations of places that we want to go. We have some of the favorites that we want to go to, and I think we want to go to the Rocks, specifically.
Well, you can go hang out with Brooke and her
right.
dad, and
right,
all those.
And then James will come with us, and
he'll be a good guy.
Right,
he'll tell some jokes.
We'll get kicked out of some places, kicked out of some bars. He's not here anymore.
Yeah. He was bored.
Yeah, I think he had.
His ADD kicked in.
Totally. Yeah. I think he had to drive his daughter around to some appointments. But
I was thinking he had to attend to some things for the other Charles.
Yeah, the other Charles called. He knew he was paying attention to this Charles and had to call and grab some attention.
I mean, we're trying to keep him, in good graces.
Yeah. See, you would have made a much. You have that diplomatic bloodline much more than I do.
My dad is much like Charles, and so
so it skipped a generation in your family.
So I become a diplomat. Yeah.
So at this point, you're representing. So when you're going out today, what are you pouring for people? You're pouring
all of these and more.
Right.
I mean, nobody's safe.
Right.
So
you're going out. So let's just set the scene. Mm-hmm. You are in basically wine country, Sonoma and Napa, California, and you're going out and you're pouring wines from France and wines from Washington.
It's super, and there are wines from California which you don't have here. Wines from Argentina. Wines from. I mean, it's okay. It's quite a range, and I think people's heads sort of like swivel off at some point, and I try to find the common link in the approaches, and ultimately. There's the value is a common thread. Yeah. I think not over winemaking hopefully is sort of a common thread that we would truly want the wines to speak for themselves distinctly.
Yeah.
And I've been very fortunate. I have amazing friends and partners in this business, and the Trinchero family has, as Joel I think mentioned a few episodes ago, in 2005, they took us under their wings to bring structure and cash to help sort of move things forward. And the family's been, for those who don't know Trinchero, they're the second largest family operation in California,
behind Gallo,
second behind Gallo. Yeah. And they can think long term. It's private company, and
that frees you up to do.
It does, and they've really let Joel and I run free in a really truly incredible way, and we're so thankful that they give us the structure to be able to do all the other stuff that is more fun.
It's really nice,
and maybe we're better suited to do.
Yeah. Well, it's great, and I imagine every place that you go today will be kind of like here, where you start them off with a little rosé, wet the whistle,
very much like this,
and then ease them into a little bit of Grenache, and then drop the cab.
I often will. James has heard this lots of times. I'll sort of help kind of get people from one place to the next. It'll be like, okay, so we're in X. Okay, we're gonna hop on the TGV. We're gonna it's 7 a.m. Okay, so you're gonna be hungover, but we want to get to Paris. we want to get to Paris in time to have a quick lunch before we hop the flight. There's a flight at 3:00 to Seattle. And then, okay, so you arrive in Seattle and you're like, it's raining. You're like, oh shit, we should have stayed in Paris. What are we doing here? and then you're like, you get your rental car and it's like, oh shit, now it's snowing as you go over the Cascades, and then you come down the other side and
light
it's
the
like,
fire,
oh my
let's pour
god,
some
you
cat.
start. There's like, oh, look at the hops over here, and look at these cherries, and so sometimes it's like helping people kind of tour from one spot to the other, kind of helps them sort of move across the disparate properties.
Right.
But no, I'm incredibly fortunate to.
I think I'd have missed the train.
Yeah,
I didn't make that
You're
7
still an
a.m.
X.
I'm still an X. Waking up.
That train is so convenient.
It's so incredible,
it runs so well. I mean, we just have lost everything in terms of trains and things like that.
Well, no, we're gonna have the Hyperloop though, right? We're gonna go from Sonoma to LA in 30 seconds.
There you
It's
go.
gonna be awesome.
Sam, the croissants are always better in probably an X also.
I can eat them probably, or at least.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, I recommend the croissant.
All right, so let's tell people how to get a hold of some of these wines.
Yeah, so I mean, the good news is they're kind of everywhere.
Yeah,
we thanks to Trinchero, we have incredibly good distribution. The Bieler Prairie Feast Sabine, the Coteau d'Aix on Provence Rosé, is the number one selling Provence Rosé under $15 in the United States. It's everywhere.
Wow. There you go.
Kicking Whispering Angels.
So no, Whispering Angels sells more, but they're at $20. So by putting a pricing quality, but we're I think top 8. All Provence. Yeah. But it's out there. So whether you're in North Carolina or South Carolina or Austin or San Diego or Eastern Washington, Charles is out there also.
Yep.
Bandol is much more limited. We only make 3,000 cases. Shatter, the Roussillon, it's about 6,000 cases, so that's a little bit more limited. Joel and I have invested in our distributor or wholesaler partners more than DTC. I know DTC is the thing everybody talks about, and probably for good reason, but we don't do direct.
Well, and plus when you're doing value oriented wines, right?
It makes a little less sense.
Yeah.
So we really
pay more for shipping than you do for
pay a lot of shipping. So we've always really emphasized our wholesalers, and we invested in them going back to the beginning.
What makes the Shatter a red Catalan wine?
So there is now a Maurice Sec appellation, but since we are finished, we're bottling the wine in California. So the winery where we make it has no temperature control, and so it's hot as hell. Starting in about April, it gets dangerously hot. So we were like, oh Jesus, let's get the wine out of there. So we ship it in bulk to St. Helena. We barrel it down in St. Helena, and then we bottle. So we lose the ability to call it Maurice Sec. Okay. So the just more generic, declassified is IGP Côte Catalan, which we are like, I don't know if anybody knows Maurice Sec anyway. So I'm not sure we lose anything.
I guess when I think Catalan, I think Spanish.
Yeah.
Barcelona. But this is this is you're in France, but it's almost more Spanish than it is French.
I mean, that's pretty cool.
It's French Catalonia.
Yeah.
That's
cool.
where
that drive between, say, Toulouse over Castle Londres area, it's over to
some beautiful country.
It's just stunning, man. I've never been to a nicer place than the Basque region.
Yeah.
As we went through there, it's
with a stop in San Sebastian for some proper eating.
Yeah, it was beautiful.
Yeah,
loved it. Spent several days there, man.
All right, John, how did you like all the wines today?
Beautiful stuff, man.
Right,
beautiful. I mean, the La Jacine.
La Jacine, yeah.
La Jacine was absolutely
that's the Côte d'Aron.
My favorite.
Yeah,
that was beautiful. I mean, especially because of the bouquet on it. Yeah. It was just stunning. Knocked me out. Beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. I mean, concrete and just pure fruit. And, just on as we all know, the great wines of the world are generally made where the grapes are just ripening into their potential. And that's happening there.
The Sabine also for the rosés.
Awesome. Thank
stunning.
you.
Yeah. I'm going to track down some of those 3,000 cases of the Bandol.
We'll get you some.
Okay.
This won't be out. So the 21 is what's in market.
Okay.
Now, it generally is a later release. They take a little time to get going.
Totally.
They kind of go through their post bottling, and then
and that's why you put them under cork instead of the screw cap.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's exactly right.
And it's Bandol Rosé. You buy your current vintage to drink last year's vintage,
That's right.
right?
Yeah.
Or 3 years.
For some, I would say less and less though. That like the Prado, Pibelno, there are a few that are sticking to the a bit more skin contact, a little darker, they have that structure to hang in there. Increasingly, it's a bit more direct to press, which makes it ready to go a bit sooner, but maybe knocks off a little bit at the end.
Yeah. Awesome.
Wow.
This has been great.
Sorry
thanks,
about
guys.
having to close this out. I know you have stuff to do, et cetera, but
it's rosé season.
Yeah,
man.
man.
You got to go out and
beautiful tasting.
get in that pink caddy and
And tell me
some
about
juice.
these bags of gummies.
Well,
pink Cadillac gummies.
they sadly are uninfused. So they're just.
Oh well,
it's
they're
just,
definitely less exciting now.
Yeah.
I was hoping.
This was to, I got this, so I put my email on the back of every bottle I produce, which is a little bit dangerous, and I get incredibly strange email at all hours of the day.
Those are the best.
And they're kind of fun at times. And anyway, somebody randomly sent me, it's like, hey, did you know that there's a company in Michigan making pink Cadillac candy? And I'm like, no. And so I called them. I was like, I want to buy a pallet of it. So I bought a pallet of these pink candy.
What I love,
we get those phone calls.
Wait, I know. Yeah. But what I love is that you're celebrating the 23rd anniversary.
Well, so this is from last year. This is from last spring. That sticker, right? Yeah, I think it is.
Still, you're celebrating those.
Right.
That's an important. The 23rd. Come on,
23rd. That's a huge year.
That's
a huge year.
That's the pink gummy anniversary,
Yeah,
right?
That's what Instagram
Gotta
says.
celebrate every year, man. Yeah.
And for those of you listening at home, if you want to send Charles random emails, it's cb at Bielerfamily, BIELER.net.
Yeah, and send them at like
Bieler
3
family.
o'clock in the morning.
Yeah,
definitely.
that's when they tend. That's when they tend to arrive.
And Charles, if you get something from Mountain Cabernet, we have no idea.
MountainCabernet@gmail.com. Send all
What's the
complaints.
strangest one you've got?
I will, as the strangest one I got. I mean, you get the weird ones of like, they find like a penny in the bottom of the bottle, and it's like, first of all, a penny doesn't fit in the bottle, so it's like, how the fuck did it get it? Like, and all these photos, or you get the the screw cap ones, like you forgot to put in a cork, like. No man, it's a screw cap. They're all these like Darwin Awards ones, which you like can't believe. Yeah. But generally speaking, they're pretty joyous. They're like on Yelp, if you're a restaurant, generally the only comments you get are like, "This fucking sucked." This is No. But it's almost, other than the missing cork one and that sort of stuff. It's generally like, "I love this. Like, I just wanted to tell you that I'm celebrating with my partner some occasion, and we opened this, and we didn't know anything about it, and like this was so special for us." Like, and that's the majority of it. So that's why
very gratifying.
Surprisingly so. So that's why I kind of keep it up. All
right, last question: is there something that you are working on or want to work on, in the next year or two? That's something that you've wanted to do. Yeah,
in wine.
Yeah. Well, actually, it doesn't have to be in wine.
So many things that I want.
All right, well,
infused gummies, whatever you want to talk about.
So I'm very much in the cannabis business, but that's a different conversation.
Oh.
It's a different podcast.
I heard you were moving towards that. So
in it currently.
You're in it currently. Are you growing or?
So no, we're making a drink. It's agave, lime, jalapeno.
Yeah.
Himalayan salt.
Yeah, talk to me.
THC and carbonated water. It's pretty tasty.
You don't have any samples with
it. Yeah. I may.
Okay.
This day just got so much better
and much less productive.
And look where you are right now, too.
I mean, totally. It's interesting. I am seeing that the trends in wine are a little concerning. I have an 18-year-old who's interested, it appears, in pursuing wine, and that's great, and I want that to happen, but I also want her to have plenty of opportunity. And back to what I was saying earlier, I feel so fortunate to have started at a time when it was all blue sky and lots of opportunity, and I can make tons of mistakes, which I did, and still do all right. I think that's a much harder time now in the wine industry, and I think cannabis is undeniable as a it's growing by 50% a year, legal, recreational cannabis
Here,
in the
here.
United States. So I feel like, the only way I know how to do anything is roll up my sleeves and try it. And we're learning a ton. On the wine side, something that I'm not doing that I'm desperately wanting to do is I have a favorite rosé. I have a few favorites, but there's one in particular that is just like, it really kind of captured my imagination. They are aging their rosé in old sherry barrels under floor yeast, and we have been trying to do that and been very unsuccessful. We've been trying to, we have not been able to keep the floor going, and we've not been using, we need to get barrels from sherry, but the whiskey industry is all over these sherry barrels. They're huge demand. To add this whole kind of sort of nutty, savory character on top of the fruit and everything else is just like, I freaking love it. So Clos Cibon, Cibo, N-N-E, is a Côte de Provence producer. It's a very unusual wine. You have to kind of reset your thinking when you go to it, because it's like it doesn't open or finish quite like what you're used to. But I think it's amazing, and I don't know how they keep their floor going. They're a little bit closer to the sea, so that may bring the humidity, up in X. It's been hard. So that's something we're messing around in the Rhone with an old Claret vineyard. Claret is a white grape. We talk about, Brits will talk about Bordeaux as a Claret, Claret. Claret, TTE, is a white grape that has been sort of overlooked really in the Rhone. But what's happening is it is a late ripener. So in these warmer, drier years, that's a great thing. And It is really drought resistant. And that is a really great thing. It seems to be, and I think the two great white wines of the south of France are Château Simon, en Blanc, which it's largely old vine Claret, and Saint-Préfère, Châteauneuf producer.
Thank you, Isabel.
Yes. Yeah. So she makes, I think, certainly the best white wine in the
know Isabel.
How do I know her?
I know, yeah.
So I don't know her that well. We have a common wholesaler. Isabel Ferrando.
Okay.
Yeah.
So she's incredible. She's a Nicole type, just like really dynamic go-getter. She making stunning wines.
But specifically the Claret, only in Magnum.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the Vieille Vigne, which it's the best wine of the South.
Life-changing wine.
I think it is. My wife is a reviewer for The Spectator for the Rhone Valley, so she spent some time with her, so she knows her much better than I do.
Nice job.
Yeah,
it is.
It's cool.
Fringe benefits.
Of course, totally, absolutely, man. So,
all right, have fun. Good luck today.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thanks for coming by.
We're gonna go meet with the Molly Stones group buyer, which is the Molly Stones,
Yeah, sure.
Sort of North Bay grocer.
Yep.
They've been very supportive over the years, and
Marin County people like rosé.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, they do.
We're coming. It doesn't look like it out there, but it's rosé season.
I think it stopped raining.
Yeah. Oh, did it stop raining? Okay, we can drink rosé again.
We're not. It's no longer the Puget Sound weather forecast. Here.
There is no off season for rosé.
We've tasted the storm away.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, you drink rosé and the clouds clear and the sun comes out.
That's what I say.
The clouds go away.
That's the secret. Yeah. Well, gentlemen, it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you very much for being such a great guest.
Yeah.
Wines are great.
Thank you so much.
Shout outs, guys.
And we're daily wine drinkers, so we appreciate the value-oriented perspective.
Here.
No, that's important.
But we don't appreciate it on a wine cellar, California type person.
Yeah.
Bart, I see you are doing very well on your fundraising for the Chef Cycle.
By the time this is aired, the ride will be over.
Right, you'll be sore and chafed,
and I'll still be probably trying to raise money for.
Actually, the biggest question is going to be: did James Joyner or Dusky Estes come in last? Right?
Come on now, James. You're a biker.
Thank you, John.
There's for your bike ride, buddy.
Thank you, John.
No problem
I
whatsoever.
Appreciate it. Yeah.
I don't do online giving, so I want to do it in person.
So. Thank you. Thanks.
Sam, anything from you?
There you go.
Keys. We're just throwing. Wait a minute. I want to throw some cash my way. The keys to the cellar. Brian's project is out. If you're
Wait, what's this?
If you're a club member, Phil sent me a member. You now have the ability to buy all this old 16600.
I'm tired of doing inventory.
Brian's trying to make his job easier. So buy some old wine so Brian doesn't have to count it anymore. The September, our Grenache weekend extravaganza, culminating with Catherine Russell and Tony Saunders playing at the Barn on September 17th.
Really?
It's going to be the best concert in Sonoma.
We're bringing a Grammy Award winner to a barn in the middle of Vineyard.
Emmy, Tony, Grammy Award winners playing it.
Right. EGOT. We need an Oscar. Robert came in, no Oscars. So we're going to have to find an Oscar winner so we can have a full EGOT party.
Get onto it.
So those are big things.
We've also gotten a lot of response from Instagram since I posted you this morning. And Black Wine Guy, MJ, says best wines out there, man.
He's trying to poach another one of our guests. Love you, MJ.
Good to see you in New York.
And we'll have a show. I don't know if this show will come out before or after it. We might switch the order, but the Moon Mountain District Reach for the Moon grand tasting and seminar with Antonio Goloni, June 3rd at Monte Rosso. Tickets available. All-star cast of winemakers for the panel, and basically every wine, as long as they're members of the association, every wine from the Moon Mountain District available to taste at that grand tasting at Monte Rosso, June 3rd. Come meet
that's
the new king.
You would enjoy.
Brené's baby, King Royal.
That sounds cool.
Yeah. Oh, she had the baby.
She had the baby.
That's right.
Yep.
King.
She had the baby,
King
and
Royal.
she's back out in the vineyard.
Love the name.
Back out in the vineyard, carrying the baby, working hard. So
that's perfect.
As only
carrying the baby around.
Oh, perfect. Baby in a carrier in the vineyard, taking Instagram pictures, doing her thing. So,
hey, that's
and she'll the grand tasting includes a guided tour of Monte Rosso with Brené and I assume King, because I don't, they can't be too far apart.
No, not at all.
June 3rd, go to Moon Mountain District. Just Google Moon Mountain District and you can get tickets for that.
Cool.
All right. Again, thank you, Charles.
Oh, yeah.
Much
Do
appreciated.
it again.
All right, guys.
Yep, more to say.
Bring more rosé.
Thanks for listening, everybody. We will talk to you next week.
Thanks, guys.